Okay, so I've had some questions. I've been working on a project to make F-15 tail flashes. So I've printed out, probably hard to see, but I printed out transparencies, like the overhead transparencies. I saw this on YouTube, somebody had it. And I created the tail flash, but I oversized this area, and I've highlighted or traced an actual print on the print bed. And it's real hard to see, but I've extrapolated where the rudder goes, so it would sit here. And when it printed, I drew the lines, and then I extrapolated off of the rudder, because that is a pretty good reference on getting everything aligned correctly. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I will cut this out and show you how I mark it, so I should keep that paper here so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. It's good to have a light background. I was kind of pre-cutting. I don't want to touch the area where the print is going to be made, because finger oil and all that kind of stuff, and the paper gets pretty staticky. I think that'll be okay. So this is how I want it to look, and I've done a light gray and the darker gray, not as dark as the gunstock gray, but it turned out pretty good. It's nice and shiny and smooth, but this is how it'll look. But when I print it, it's going to be backwards, so it'll be this is where I created it in the reverse image in PowerPoint, and I'll share what I can, figure out how to share that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to face it down. This is where the ink is, and you need toner, laser jet toner, to print on this transparency, because there's a couple other YouTube videos out there, really good explanations on that the ink from an inkjet won't lift off of this transparency. And there's some other techniques people have explained, but I haven't been real successful with those. But this has been, I'm getting successful with it. So I wanted to share, and I'll line it up how I think it needs to go. And I kind of have another one right behind it, just to give the paper some support. And everything looks pretty good with the alignment. Let's see if we can zoom in on that here. If I can get this to move, so you can see. It's kind of get the light off of there. If you can see out of the shadows, kind of hard to see. But I'm going to come off of these rudder points and then align straight down, and then those will line up with those marks right here and here, and then the blue mark, I'm going to keep it on right on that red line, so that it'll be positioned properly. And I'll show you how that looks when I get it all mated up here. So this I have to hold very still, not very, I'm going to freehand it, but I think everything looks really straight. It looks, move this and about there. I'm going to try to keep it still with one finger. I'll use my other finger as a, use that same finger as a brace. Oops, it moved a little. Yeah. There. Mark. So that blue line, the long vertical line, you can see that, this long vertical line will be on, it won't, ink, the printer won't touch that, it's going to be face down, so it won't transfer onto the print. So if I get this centered just right, I think that'll be good. Go up just like that. Now we have to secure it with some packing tape. Now I have all the settings fine-tuned for the print. That took a long time to get that right. I've got 5, 10, 6, probably about 25 trials. I'm going to stretch this just a little bit to give it a little tautness when I put this second piece on. Now I'm going to put one on either side. It may not be necessary, but I think it helps hold it down better. So we'll try that. Now if I get a little wrinkle in the tape, that's no big deal. Printer's not going to touch that. Even when it does the bed leveling, it doesn't seem to bother it at all. Let me get this one down. Now there's one thing that I found because of the way I'm printing. The rudder it has these little cuts in it. So when it prints, this is void to start with. So there's a high probability, and it's happened, that the first few layers try to skip away. So I'm going back to one of the other techniques I learned a long time ago, is I have some of this Elmer's stick glue. It's disappearing purple. No sponsorship or anything there, but it helps keep that first few layers in place, and it doesn't, then all you have to do is just wipe it off the final print when you're done. And it wipes off just with my fingers. So now we're going to start the print. I'll do a prepare, I'll do out of home, just to clean it up a little. I need to cut that piece off there. There we go. Just in time. Get that little stray piece gone. And we'll let this set up, and we'll come back to it when it starts printing some, and then I'll show you probably the midway and the final product. So we'll go down to print. I have many trials on this, vertical, but these are horizontal, and it took some fine tuning of the file in Cura, and I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos, a couple folks really good. I'll put a link to their information in the description, because they were very helpful, whether they knew it or not, in allowing me to understand what the settings do And actually they had printed some samples so I could see what it would look like. So we'll let this get started and we'll come back to that. Let's see if we can get way down there. We can watch this thing. What we're looking for right now is to see where that patch lines up. It looks pretty good. You see the rudder outline down there. Hopefully you can see it here in a second. Barely. And the patch seems to be centered. Maybe you can't see it as well as I can. But it looks like it'll work. Come back to this now. So it looks like we're printing pretty good. I'll just let it continue. You can see it's getting further along. See the top. And just wait for it. Okay, now we get to see what it looks like. Pretty good. Clean off the glue a little bit. Looks good. We'll clean those off, the strands. Looks like the other ones. Looks pretty good. And we have one more to do. Nice. Okay, so the print is done. If we pull this off, perhaps. And look at that. We got a perfect print. Nice. The numbers got a little blurred right there, but that's okay. We might be able to clean that up a little. See how shiny it is. Now we just clean up the plate. So it does make it easier to pull things off the plate when it's cooled off. Okay, so I brought in an image into Inkscape. You can download that for free. It's pretty handy. Some pretty good YouTube videos on how to use it. But the video will get a little messed up, but it's easy. Just go to File, go to Open, go to your image that you've downloaded. But you can see that this has a background. As I move it over, the background follows it. I don't want that background. So what I learned and what I've done is I will click on it. I'll go to Path, Trace Bitmap. I will go to Multicolor. I'm going to check mark Remove Background, but first I'm going to do colors. I want the color image rather than the subdued image. So I'm going to remove the background. I hit Apply. That disappears there. I could update the preview. It might take a while. But then when I move this, you can see there's no longer a background. And that's exactly what I wanted. So I'll move that over. I'll click on the image I brought in. Delete that. I need to move this back over to the image area. And then I will save it. I'll hit Save and OK. And then I need to export it. So I'm going to go down to Export. then I can change this file format from the PNG to Inkscape SVG. I have not done plain or PDF or anything like that. I just do the SGV, because then I can insert this image into my PowerPoint. And once I hit export, all's good in the world. I'll show you how that looks on the PowerPoint. Okay, so that image that I created, removed the background using Inkscape, I've added to a PowerPoint presentation. And as you can see, when you drag them over each other, they have no background. You can see through them. And what I did is I figured out what size and what kind of font I wanted. I wanted something bold, maybe something with an outline, but some of these don't exist. You have to go out and download to see what they would look like. I think I did this one, Agency FB, seemed to look pretty close to what I was after. And then just to figure out what the shape was, I drew some lines. I've done this one multiple times, but I'll show you how this looks. I'll undo these, and to do that I highlight the image. I'm going to format the graphic. I'll go ahead and undo so you can see what it looks like when it's staged beforehand. And this one I have to do twice because there's two images here, and then I have to move them around. So to make them look, oops, this one didn't turn. Why did that not turn? Oh, I didn't do that. Okay. So I wanted to get things lined up to where they looked very, very similar to what an actual airplane looks like. So I have the image here, it's maybe up a little bit further. So, and I have to account for that rudder that's right here, that cutout. So this is usually moved over just a little bit more. Just do an arrow key. That's fine. And so that's what it would look like when it's printed, when these are imaged, transferred onto the print, the 3D print. And like I said, I use transparency paper. It's the old kind of transparency paper that we would print things on and put it on an overhead projector. Now I figured out from YouTube, and I put those links down below of some of those good people that shared their knowledge and experience to allow me to get this project accomplished. I tried using wet transfer emblems that were clear, but after they dried, they turned white behind it, no matter what I did. Watched lots of videos, read manuals, read books, bought products, and nothing seemed to really do the trick on a 3D printed surface, no matter how smooth the surface I created. I even sprayed it with clear finish, let it dry, and it still happened. So getting this transparency paper idea underway, this was the game changer. This was the ticket. So these were the images that I put together, and as you can see, I've flipped them. They're all grouped together so I could move them around. This one I could still do it. You can see when I click on it, it reverts back to regular viewing. But think about it, when this is printed onto a transparency and then the filament gets deposited on this surface, that ink will get picked up. That it's not really ink, I shouldn't say ink. The toner from the laser printed printer that's on this transparency in this arrangement will transfer onto that filament, the 3D filament. Now sometimes it wouldn't transfer certain parts of the letters or numbers, so required a little bit more fine tuning of the auto bed adjustment to get that nozzle very, very, very close to the print surface with a Z offset. So I had to make sure I had my Z offset and my bed level very precise on my Ender 3 to get a good adhesion of the filament to pick up that toner from these images. And as you can see in the other parts of the video, they turned out really, really well. So I put 2 on each transparency so that I would have, and I printed 2 of each. So I had 4 images of the same thing. So I had this one, I printed a second sheet. Only could print one at a time because they're very staticky and the paper clings together. So it's best just to print one sheet at a time. I know it might sound wasteful in time, but it'll jam up your printer if you don't. So I printed those. If you use ink, the ink will not transfer. Lesson learned. You can try it if you want. Maybe you'll have better luck with a different printer perhaps, but not on my Ender 3. So when I printed these, that gives me enough room to cut out the image. And these lines are oversized, much larger than the actual print. The actual print is inside of this quite a bit, but it doesn't show where the rudder is here. So that's why when I print these transparencies out, I'll cut it down, leaving a good border around it, and then I will flip this image over so I'm viewing it correctly. I lay it on top of one of the test prints, and then I mark where the rudder extends out. So I have reference marks on my build plate, those same identical reference marks, so I can line this up correctly and get very good repeatable prints. So I hope that explains how I transferred these images, reversed them so they would print reversed, get it all laid out, print it, cut these out, lay them out on the build plate, put a little dab of Elmer's glue, that stick glue right in this area, begin my print, and wait 2 hours and 18 minutes to see the result. And it was very, very pleasing to see that result. I hope this helps. Okay, so here's my Cura build for this rudder. I wanted to show some of the settings. If you want a copy of the print file, I can add that. I did it in Tinkercad. Learned a lot. So my line width is 0.4, and my nozzle, because my nozzle is 0.4, I tried a 0.2 and I didn't like the quality very well, so I went back to a 0.4. So I learned some things from YouTube and watching others share their experiences and tips for better quality prints. For example, the top and the bottom layers, I went with top layer of 6, I think it was at 1, and a bottom layer I did 8. The pattern for the top and the bottom I did zigzag. I tried concentric and I didn't like that too much, so I stayed with a zigzag, and that allows me to do the line direction, which gives a smoother print surface, finished surface. These settings, I did not come up with these myself. I used those from one of the YouTube creators that I watched. I put those links down below. And I haven't really tried anything different with that, with those line directions. I think they're great. For now, if I have time, I'll tinker with those a little more, maybe find something that might be a little smoother, but this is fine. This process using the transparency makes things really, really smooth, and a good finish, clean product. The ironing, I learned about the ironing pattern, and so I did a concentric. I could have done zigzag, but I did concentric with a line spacing and the inset of 0.08 millimeter. So it comes in 0.08 millimeter from the edge, and it will go around the edge concentrically and keep the nozzle very, very close to the filament, or excuse me, to the print filament. It'll retract the filament, but keep that heated nozzle very, very close and kind of smooths out those edges of that top print. Basically like taking an iron and smoothing out wrinkles in your clothes, right? So some of the other settings, again, I get to the infill. I've tried it with concentric and lines, and I just went with zigzag for the final version right now. Again, with the 45 and 135 line directions. And other than the temperature, which was defaulted to 200, I went to 220. And the build plate, instead of 60, I went to 70, just so I'd make sure that I'd had good heat through that transparency, which also reminds me, if you do a print and it starts to fail, you're not going to really be able to reuse that transparency, even if it's just the outer edges being done and the ink is still there. That transparency has absorbed the heat from the build plate. I didn't get any good adhesion when I tried that a couple times, so I abandoned that idea of reusing the transparency. And I'll explain how I print those transparencies so I have extras when that happens. That's about it for the settings. You can see the build. I can do the slice with that. And the rudder piece, the actual little rudder board, you can see that there's a void around it. And this is by design. That's why I mentioned in the earlier part of the video about putting a little bit of that Elmer's glue stick right about in this area. So it just gives this surface that's being printed free from the rest of it. It keeps it from departing during the print. So it keeps it still, and then eventually it will build and connect and fill in the middle section until we get to the final print, and we still have that groove on either side and everything looks fine.